All right, so this is Keenan and Joey again. We're going to be commentating over something a little different. This isn't my footage. This is someone else's. This is Genki Sudo versus Karo Uno. It was the first time someone in Japan tried to make a show out of jiu-jitsu, so that's kind of cool. So it's no-gi submission grappling in like televised. So there's actually a big crowd around here. It's just dark. So these are actually two Japanese wrestlers who turned into MMA fighters. So they actually have a wrestling base, kind of like you, Joey. What do you think the hardest thing is about transitioning from wrestling
it's
into jiu-jitsu?
4 o'clock.
Well, the base is probably the biggest help. So the technique just takes so much longer to learn than in wrestling. Because in wrestling, it's more about speed and strength than it is about technique, as compared to jiu-jitsu anyway. But when you're going for some moves, you can set your jiu-jitsu like side control up with your shots and your throws. So it's easier to get to a good position with a good wrestling base.
Any jiu-jitsu guy's worst fear is grappling a wrestler who's trained some jiu-jitsu, because it is so hard to grapple a wrestler because it's just they're a different style. They're just so much more aggressive.
It's more speed. You try to use your speed and aggressiveness, like you just said.
Yeah, and for me at least, like in jiu-jitsu, there's so many opportunities to rest. Like if you have someone's back or you have them in close guard, you can kind of rest and take a breather. But in wrestling, there's really no time to rest, because if you rest, you get pinned, right? So they bring over that conditioning and that feeling.
And it kind of takes your jiu-jitsu off. Like it takes your jiu-jitsu game away, kind of to some extent, because passing guard is way different as a wrestler than somebody with jiu-jitsu.
That's true. I think you look at it in a different way. For me, it's like, okay, I know I need to get past his legs, but for a wrestler, it's just like, why are these legs in my way? You know?
And yeah, and some wrestlers just don't know what to do. So and for me, sometimes it's just like, man, it just seemed like he just let me have that. You know?
Yeah.
Because they don't know what to do, because they've been training against mostly jiu-jitsu guys. And I've come to notice there's not very many wrestlers that do jiu-jitsu actually, which was a surprise for me.
Yeah, it seems like most of the people who do jiu-jitsu don't come from wrestling, which is surprising because, after high school, if you're not that good of a wrestler, you don't really have anywhere to go with wrestling, and you'd think you would want to transition to some other sort of mat sport.
But most people, wrestling is kind of a sport where you don't really, it's not something that I wanted to do for all my life anyway. So I was kind of burnt out of it after high school. I didn't really want to do it anymore. And once I discovered jiu-jitsu, I was just in love.
Yeah, so he got him in a really tight triangle here.
Really good triangle.
Karo Uno, though, is so hard to submit. I don't know from personal experience, but from what I've seen, it's really hard to submit Karo Uno. If you guys want to know, I actually have a really good triangle defense that I sort of developed, and if you want to see that, go ahead and let us know in the comments, and we'll upload a detailed instructional. So Karo Uno kind of turned to his right, which actually makes the choke tighter, but luckily they're slippery, so he's able to pull our head out there. And Genki Sudo, I'm sure most of you know who Genki Sudo is if you're a big jiu-jitsu guy. If you follow MMA or jiu-jitsu at all. He's out of commission right now. I think he hurt his neck or he retired. I don't know what it is. So he was trying to pass his guard a little bit. It doesn't look like seems like they're more wrestling style. These guys, it seems like they learned from someone who went from wrestling to jiu-jitsu too. They're not really using technical stuff. It's kind of like explosive jiu-jitsu with the occasional submission that they know.
And when you have the wrestling base and you're fighting somebody with good jiu-jitsu or good wrestling based jiu-jitsu, it's a lot harder because you're used to grappling people that are also jiu-jitsu or that are also all jiu-jitsu.
That's true.
So when you grapple somebody like this, you're like, wow, he knows everything I know, basically.
Yeah, that's true. And I know from experience, I may be better at jiu-jitsu than Joey, but I'm definitely not better at wrestling than him. And when we start on our feet, he has a lot more chance of submitting me or passing my guard just because he can throw me or double leg me really hard and end up right in side control or mount or maybe take my back. Whereas if we start on our knees, I just pull guard and he can't really pass my guard. But wrestling is such a big deal too, especially in tournaments. If you have a good wrestling base and they can't take you down, you really dictate where the fight's going to go. Same as in MMA. I feel like wrestling is the most important martial. You can't call it a martial art. It is a martial art.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the most important one to learn for MMA.
In MMA, it is important because you can dictate whether the fight goes to the ground or stays up.
Exactly. If you're getting beat in one portion, you can take it to the ground.
Yeah.
And for a while, people used to think that Muay Thai or Jiu-Jitsu was the best. But really, I mean, especially in like a super solid wrestler that has some Jiu-Jitsu and some stand-up can win a lot. I mean, look at George St. Pierre. I mean, he can't even submit Dan Hardy, and he can't really outstrike Paulo Tiago, but he just out-wrestles guys, and he just wrestles them.
His aggression.
And it's not, he's not even that aggressive in terms of, like, hurting the guy, but he just stays on him,
Yeah.
And just drives him into the fence. And, like, it's kind of like John Fitch. John Fitch has pretty much the exact same style as GSP. He's just not as athletically gifted.
Mm-hmm.
GSP just, like, won the jackpot on the genetic lottery. So he's looking for, and not even looking for the Kimura right here, which is kind of interesting.
He's trying. I think he's looking for the sweep.
Yeah, he's maybe trying for the sit-up sweep here. Genki Sudo has that awesome back tattoo. What do you think of that tattoo?
I don't know.
It's a bird.
It's all right.
I think it's pretty cool. And again, see how they don't really go for chokes from here. I mean, other than the guillotine, like the Darce is there, the Anaconda is there, but they're kind of more about head control, like head and arm control. And they're dropping. Look at there's the
right
switch.
there. That was a really good.
That's a beautiful
really good
switch.
high crotch.
Is that a high crotch or a switch?
He hit a high crotch, and Genki Sudo hit a switch on him right after, which was beautiful.
Yeah, so there he goes for a Kimura finally. But he was trying to Kimura him while he's mounted.
He's got mount, so.
And I know some pretty good Kimura fences as well, guys. So if you get Kimura a lot, let us know, and we'll go over some Kimura defenses that work for me, and also some Kimura attacks, and kind of a different way of going for Kimura, which has worked out really well for me. So now here he's got his back, and again, you just see, like a jiu-jitsu guy would just be sort of like clinging to him, where as Genki Sudo, it's all about his sprawl. Like even in midair, he's like sprawling on his back. And
he's like a cat, kind of.
Yeah.
He can just move, and he has very good balance.
Exactly.
Really good balance.
What was that move he went for there?
He was, I don't know. It's those are kind of moves that are just more fancy looking if you pull them off, but you don't really want to try them if you're not really confident with it. It just looks good.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
What would be your favorite takedown if you had to choose?
My favorite takedown is probably a deep double, but those are kind of hard to get sometimes. So going for the high crotch is usually really good from a pummeling situation. Because the pummeling is kind of good to set up the high crotch. Mm-hmm. You pull the arm up over. It's kind of hard to show. We can show you it in another video if you just ask us about it. But probably a high crotch or a double leg if you get in deep.
And if you want to get some jiu-jitsu or some takedown tutorials by Joey, he's actually really good at explaining his stuff. And I think we're going to do it in a style, instead of talking as we show the technique, we'll film the technique, show it in different ways, and then show Joey doing it live, and then we'll commentate over it, or like narrate it, just like we're doing now. Can I ask you another question?
Yes.
What is your least favorite takedown?
I'd say my least favorite is probably a single, but getting in on the single leg is really easy. It's just once you get there, it's a lot more work. So a single is a good takedown, but only because it's easy to get.
And if you had a takedown that you were just sort of ambivalent towards, and you don't really like and you don't really not like, which takedown would that be?
Probably a fireman's carry.
Fireman's carry. All right, and we got to wrap this up, folks. We got 4 seconds, and we'll see you next time.